Good evening.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I've come to love many of the folks that I've come to meet here over the years and have come with me on campaigns. And it's always exciting to get together with people that you just enjoy spending time with. And that's kind of one of the things that happens on campaigns is you just have this bond with people that you've been to a place and you've worked and sweated, and when you go to bed at night, you just fall down dead because you've worked all day long. And there's a connection that you have with people with which you've shared that experience. It's often like going through kind of a natural disaster. When you, if you've ever had a congregation together where you've gone through, and I know some of you have probably helped out in some of the tornadoes and some of the things that have happened, and you go with a group of guys or a group of people going out to help in those situations, and there's a bond that happens there. Because you've worked together, you've sweated together, because you've gone together to meet this same goal, to relieve suffering and helping people, and there's just no feeling like that anywhere else in the world. I'm here to tell you about Latin American missions. A little bit more than what we've had in the past. Last year when I came, I talked about the campaigns that we've had in 2019. And so tonight, though, I want to kind of give you like a little more of a bird's eye view of what Latin American missions is all about. Latin American missions is partnering in missions by providing gospel opportunities for all. And we use that word gospel opportunities to say go. And isn't that what we're asked to do? Isn't that what we've been tasked with? Isn't that our commission, is to be people who are willing to go? Now, for some of you, that go may mean go next door. For some of us, it may mean, hey, go across the street. Some of it may be go visit a family member. Some of it may be go to another country. But every single one of us has the obligation and the duty and the command to go. Latin American missions started in the 1950s, back when there were only 3 congregations of the Lord's Church in the country of Panama. And a gentleman by the name of Jamie Holland and Bob Bryson began working in these countries. See, these churches were there and existed simply because the Panama Canal existed, and that at one time the United States owned that property, that major military and economic asset that was there in the country of Panama. We used to own it. And because we owned it, there was a lot of infrastructure there and a lot of American presence. In fact, so much so that the dollar is still used as the currency in the country of Panama. And so that influence there meant that there were members of the church that were there, whether they had been placed there and shipped overseas because of the military branch that they were in, or perhaps that they had some economic interest because of the canal zone and the different trading and the economic opportunities that were presented because of the canal. And because these churches were there, they were what we call gringo first congregations. They spoke English. They were there to serve the needs of the local American brethren. And nothing wrong with that. There was a need, it was there, and it was being fulfilled. But as Christians do, whenever they had the gospel somewhere, they knew it needed to be spread. And because of those opportunities in these churches, they realized the need for evangelism in that country. And so word began to spread. The evangelistic fervor happens, as it does whenever a Christian goes to a new place. We saw that happen in the Bible, right? You know, Jesus' instructions were to start in Jerusalem and Samaria and Judea, and then the uttermost parts of the world. Right? Then when the great persecution came, what happened? Well, the church was scattered, and as it was scattered, it took the gospel with it. And that's what's happening, has been happening in Central and South America ever since the 1950s. And so when we see what has happened over those years, it's awesome to be able to say that from 3 congregations in the early 1950s, now there are over 300 congregations of the Lord's people. Some of that's because of the evangelistic efforts that we've been doing. Some of it's because some of the preachers that we planted have gone in and started some new congregations. And some of it has just been natural growth because these congregations have gone from being mission points to being missionaries. That's exciting to me. When we think about the growth of the church, there are very few places on the entire hemisphere of the West that have had more growth in that amount of time as a percentage than Panama. And we're real proud of that, to have been part of that. When we think about the history of Latin American missions, I would be remiss to not include my own father, Jack Farber. We moved down in 1983, and my father began teaching in the preaching school there in the country of Panama. And it was then from that time, when I was 6 years old, that we started being involved in the work in Panama. One of the basic strategies that we see that has been huge in what we do is that we send native men to teach their own people. Consider this verse from Romans chapter 10, where it says, "How then shall they call on him in whom they've not believed? And how will they believe in him in whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher?" Now think about it in these terms. That call that they're going to make to the Lord, what language is that going to be in? It's going to be in their own tongue. They're not going to call on the Lord just because, some American missionary came down. They're not going to suddenly adopt his language, adopt his way of worship. He's going to call on him in his own tongue. Well, then it just goes to understand is if they're going to call on him, they're going to have to hear. Well, how should they hear? Well, they should also hear in their own tongue. And if they're going to hear in their own tongue, shouldn't they hear in their own tongue from somebody of their own culture? That's our strategy. We teach native men to teach their own people. We're so proud of the school that we have in the country of Panama. Right now, it services more than, we have 18 guys in the school right now. A group of those are about to graduate in December. And when we think about the impact that one guy can make, imagine if every student that we graduate, and this is a conservative estimate, only converts one person per year for the rest of his life. Pretty conservative for a guy that's been through preaching school. Wouldn't you say? He only converts one person per year for the rest of his life, times 18, times the 50 or more years that they may have in their life. Can you imagine the impact that has? That's enough to change a culture. That's enough to change the world. We've lost the ability to dream and believe that we have the ability to change the world. I'm here to tell you that the gospel is still powerful. The gospel will still change the world today. And we're going to do it one person at a time, one family at a time, one congregation at a time. Changing the world for him. The things that are really well known about Latin American missions is that we take campaigns. We take campaigns and we take people from the States and we take them on medical campaigns or evangelistic campaigns and we do that to help establish churches or to help churches that are struggling and that sort of thing. And those are things that we do. But the main reason we're able to do those things is because we have men, preachers, who are willing to go to places that you wouldn't go, that I wouldn't go to. There's a place called El Jicaral that's the hottest place in the planet as far as I'm concerned. I spent a week there where you would pray for a breeze until the breeze came, and it was like a hairdryer. I wouldn't want to take my family there. But we've got a man there in El Jicaral, Nicaragua. Because that's his home. That's all he's ever known. One of the other great works that we're involved with is the Children's Home of the Americas. It's the place where we've had some of the most impactful work that we've ever done. And while it's limited in its scope because of the facilities that we have and the number of house parents that we can keep at one time, it has been doing such great work for almost 20 years now. When we think about the Children's Home, it is on the campus of the Bible School of the Americas, and this is one of the groups of graduating people that have gone through our school. And when we think about that facility, we have some of the best staff on that campus right now than I can believe we've ever had in history. And I've been involved in this, like I said, since I was 6 years old. That includes when my dad was on staff at the school. We right now have an amazing staff of men who are dedicated, devoted to the idea that training men to teach their own people is the highest calling that they can have. They really are really special guys that make sure that they do all that they can to share with these young men what it takes to be a preacher in these areas. But also we have the Children's Home, and on the campus there of our preaching school is this Children's Home. And right now we have 19 kids in that Children's Home. Those kids are there and in our care because of all of the tragedies that you know about, like all the same abuses that happen here, all of the same neglect that happened here, all of the same poverty that happened here, except on a third world country level. So imagine all of those hardships, except you're living in a third world country. Can you imagine the disadvantage? Can you imagine the hopelessness because of the situation and the place where you're at? There's no path for you to crawl out of that. There's no programs to help make you better. There are literally kids around the globe tonight that live outside the city dumps. It's not uncommon to see a 9-year-old little girl or little boy who has 2 or 3 of his siblings. He's the mom or she's the mom and he's the dad. In both cases, they are doing all that they can for their little siblings. And the dump is a wealth, a treasure trove of food and shelter. It's the only way they know to survive. There are kids in this world that are suffering more than any of us can imagine. And we don't want to imagine. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to admit that there's more that we could be doing. We don't want to take responsibility. Now I know there's not enough money in the world to solve all those problems. And money's not going to solve those problems. But what is going to solve some of those problems is that the gospel given and planted into the hearts of these kids is going to solve that problem. In our children's home, we're so blessed to be able to provide for them all of those basic needs of shelter and clothing and education and health care. But more importantly, we're fulfilling the spiritual needs. We're fulfilling the need that they have to know their God. Every single day, there's some sort of either devotional or they're going to worship. And they're being a part of a family that prioritizes God first. And you know how that works in your family. When you do that, and you do that effectively, it will set the child's course for the rest of his life. That's what Proverbs tells us, right? Train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. I'm so blessed to be able to say that of all kids that come through our facility who have spent any significant amount of time in our facility, nearly every single one of them have chosen of their own accord to put on Christ as their Lord in baptism. Their life is forever changed, not because of the food that we provided or the education that we made sure that they got, including 2 or 3 tutors that we have employed at all times. It's because they know Jesus. When we think about these kids, every one of them is so excited to see you when you show up, whether they know you or not. They know, they've been there long enough, they know that the people that come onto this campus are people that want to come and they want to share love. They want to share the idea that we have some things in common, where all of us together have a similar purpose. And that's not something that they've experienced in their life. They're coming from a home where mom and dad can't even agree on what to eat for supper. They can't agree on how to spend the money. They can't agree on anything. And here, they're in an environment where everybody has the same goal. Everybody has the same intention. And that's love. When you think about mission work, unfortunately, one of the things that it takes to do mission work is money. There he is. So this picture is brought to you by our brother Logan Cates. Finances is always part of mission work, and when you think about the finances, we really are first and foremost about supporting preachers. And when you look at all of the divisions of the pie here, almost 85% of our budget goes towards supporting preachers, whether that's helping provide a salary for them to be able to work on a full-time basis, being a servant of God, or being a preacher in a training school, or benevolence, or renting properties, where the church can meet. All of those things kind of go together into it. I was talking with the elders before worship, and I was letting them know that we're kind of lumped in categorically into the same group as just nonprofits. It's kind of a generic pool of people. But when you think about nonprofits themselves, the average overhead for a nonprofit is anywhere between 25 and 35%. That means a quarter out of every dollar that you give to a nonprofit generally goes to the overhead. And overhead is things like keeping the lights on in the offices, printing paper or computers or staff or whatever. We're blessed to be able to say that we only have an 8% overhead. That's a fraction of what an average nonprofit does. And we're blessed to do that because we have great leadership in our elders that make sure that every dollar that has been purposed that comes in goes to where it's purposed for. If you send a check to Latin American Mission and say, I want to feed kids in the children's home, 100% of that dollar is kids. We raise the money for our overhead. We don't take it out of general giving. But at the end of the day, right now, because of different circumstances, because of the pandemic and churches cutting budgets, individuals losing jobs, we're running at about a 13% deficit month over month in our monthly giving. Now, we're going to be solvent at the end of this month or at the end of this year because we have some one-time gifts. But I call one-time gifts are like what you get at Christmas or your birthday. Those gift cards, you can go out and go, ladies, you can go to your favorite store, buy some clothes, buy some shoes. Gentlemen, you'll go buy a bow and arrow or a shotgun of some sort. But those gift cards, what if you had to pay your bills with what you got in gift cards at Christmas or your birthday? It'd be a very uncomfortable situation. And so one-time gifts that they're absolutely a blessing, and we've got to have those in order to make the mission work. But what we truly need is people who are willing to say, I'll help every single month. One of the programs that we do on this term we call skip a meal, save a soul. For example, this afternoon, I went out and there were 4 of us, and the bill after the meal was about $60 for 4 people to go out and sit down and eat after Sunday services. That's not uncommon. Most of us will probably do that on a regular basis. What if one time out of the month, instead of going out to eat, you said, kids, we're going to go home. We're going to eat real simple, mac and cheese, out of the box. We're going to, maybe cut up some Spam, because I know that's Logan's favorite meal. We're going to, we're going to eat real cheap. And we're going to send the rest of that to help support mission work. That adds up real quick, $40, $50 once a month that you would otherwise spend on a luxury for yourself, that we would help and help feed kids, help train preachers, help support a preacher in the field. That's one of the things that we'd love for you to maybe adopt and help in mission work. Finally, tonight, I want you to open your Bibles to Titus chapter 3. If you've been on a mission trip with me, you've heard me talk about this verse. This verse, more than any other verse that I can think of, really encapsulates what mission work is about. Titus chapter 3, verse 14. And it says this. There's still a llama there. Yeah, you missed it. It was another one. Appreciate that. So, I'm blaming you. I don't know if it was you, but I'm sure it was. So, it says this, let our people learn to devote themselves to good works, so as to help in cases of urgent need and not be unfruitful. Titus chapter 3, verse 14. So let's kind of go through that real quick. Our people, for example. The world around us says that we're so divided. The world around us wants to think that there are classes of people, that there are classes of individuals, that there's a them and an us. And in reality, in the Lord's church, that's true. There is an us and there is a them. Now, the world's going to tell us that that's terrible, that's bad. And I would agree with that. That kind of division isn't what the Lord planned on. But right now, we have to recognize that there is an us and there is a them. There is the Lord's body that Peter calls a royal priesthood, a special citizenry. We are called out. We are adopted. We are special. We are different. There is an us and there is a them. Now, the great thing about being us is that our number one job is to make more of them, more of us. That's our primary goal. Take more of them and bring them to be us. Then he says, let our people learn. There's no such thing as a born preacher. Lane, when he was born at the cooling of the crust, if he were here, he would love that. If Lane were here, his foot wasn't stamped at the bottom when he came out preacher. Logan wasn't, declared a preacher when he was born. The elders here were not born to be elders. I was not born to be a missionary. None of us were born into any of those positions. And so you think of any person that you admire, spiritually speaking, somebody that you look up to in your spiritual life, and you think, man, how did he get there? It's learned. Every one of it is learned. There's no natural Bible class teacher. There's no natural preacher. There's no natural, person who can just say a really amazing prayer. All of it is learned. What happens when you don't learn? What happens to people when they reject that kind of knowledge? When they do, you see really quick that, for example, in Hosea chapter 4, there he says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I reject you from being a priest. Again, we go back to our people scenario. right? Where Peter calls us a royal priesthood. I've rejected you from being a priest if you choose not to learn. Of course you can't be that beacon, that light on a hill. You've got to learn that. Then it says, let our people learn to devote themselves. What are you devoted to? What is something that you are most devoted to in your life? What's your life about? What's the first thing in your life? What takes priority in everything that you do? What's the first thing you think about when you wake up, the last thing you think about when you go to bed? What is it that you're devoted to? Is it your girlfriend? Is it your family? Is it your school? Is it your football team? Is it your finances? Is it your church family? What are you devoted to? What is it that makes your blood run? I tell you, one of the things that I love about my job, why I get up every morning and do what I do, is because I get to help plant churches. You want to help plant churches? Come with me. I'll show you how to do it. We'll get an army of people planting churches all over the world. But it takes devotion to do that. It takes a commitment that is unwavering from the plan that is ahead. What are you devoted to? Here he asks us to devote ourselves to good works. Good works, those things where you are serving your fellow man. We're accomplishing one of the two greatest commands that we can ever see. You know, when we look back into the past and we see all the way back in the beginning, Adam and Eve had just one rule. Kids, how'd you like it if you just had one rule at your house? Make life a lot easier, right? If you just had one thing you had to focus on, you only had to focus on the one rule, wouldn't that make your life a lot easier? Like mom and dad, just get off my back, I've done the one rule. Adam and Eve just had the one rule. Well, guess what? As Christians, we just have one more than one rule. We have two. The first is to love God. The second is to love and serve people. When we do those things, we are fulfilling all of the rest of those things that we think are rules. When we do those things, we put everything else in its proper perspective. And we get it right. The only way to do that is good works. We read that in where we talk about what happens with faith. You know, if you tell a brother or sister to go and be warmed and filled, but you don't give them anything, what good is that? We show our faith through what we do and through our service to other people. We devote ourselves to good works so that we can help in cases of urgent need. I'm not sure if you've ever experienced the sensation of panic. I'm told that I've never experienced it myself, but I'm told when somebody is drowning, that the panic can overwhelm them. I took some lifeguarding classes, and one of the things that you are told that you have to do when you're helping somebody who's in the middle of that kind of crisis is that you have to prepare for them to be panicked. And so you can't predict what they're going to do. So you have to understand what they're going through. And so in that panic, you can't be panicked yourself. You've got to go and help in that urgent need. And there are lots of things in this life that can create that panic in our lives, right? There's some people that think that their family is in urgent need. There's something wrong going on. Perhaps relationships are broken. There are some people who think that their finances are in urgent need. They don't know how they're going to get to the end of the month. There's too much month at the end of their bills. There's some people who think that their job is an urgent need. Whether it's an unstable job or whether their job has some importance to it. There are lots of things that we can create in this world that we would say are urgent need, but there's only one urgent need that is universal to all mankind, and that is this problem of sin. when we understand that that is man's number one urgent need, then everything else comes into perspective. Then that means that when we consider the self that we have, the us, our people, and we look out into the world and they see that they are suffering and that they have an urgent need that only we can fulfill because we are the mouthpiece of God. We're the ones to take the gospel to them. There's only one urgent need, and that is only repaired by Jesus. That need can only be fulfilled by the Savior. You notice on the screen that there's a life ring to save people from drowning. That's Jesus. He's there to save. Let our people learn to devote themselves to good works so as to help in cases of urgent need and not be unfruitful. What happened to the tree when Jesus passed by and it was unfruitful? What did he do to it? He instantly destroyed it. Those who are not fruitful in the kingdom are not connected to the vine, the source of life. Because if you're connected, if you're involved in doing the things that we ought to be doing, then fruit is a natural byproduct. So if there's no fruit, then there's a problem. If there's no fruit, you can diagnose what the issue is. If we're unfruitful, then we're worthless in the kingdom. And we will be discarded. It's easy to be a fruit bearer. It's not that hard. Oh, we've made it as difficult as we possibly can make it. We've really tried to go out of our way to make this very, very difficult, to come up with programs and lists and Bible studies and all of these things. And ultimately, the idea, the way to bear fruit is just simply helping your fellow man. This whole passage here, there's nothing complicated about this. Let our people learn to devote themselves to good works so as to help in cases of urgent need and not be unfruitful. There's nothing complicated about that. Tonight, how's your urgent need? One of my favorite newer songs that is sung, if you haven't learned it, I would encourage you to. It's called In Need. In need of grace, in need of love, in need of mercy raining down from above. And the chorus is, in need of Christ, the perfect Lamb. Do you have Christ in your life? Are you serving Him and His people and the world? If you've not been fruitful, tonight's the night to get your roots better. If you've not taken Jesus on in baptism, you have no hope. We would encourage you, if you have any need tonight, come. The elders here will welcome you and will pray with you. They're good men. I've known them for a couple of years now. I've had the opportunity to get to know them better. This family, this church family will embrace you no matter what your past was, no matter what you're dealing with in your life right now. This is the family of God, and we're here to help you in any way you can, in any way we can. Won't you come while we stand and sing?